And we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Titans of Tarot. It's been a while since I've been live on YouTube, and I hope everybody's doing well. And I'm very excited here to have Camelia Elias on with me today. Let me just say hello to everybody before I check in with Camelia. Let me just say hello to everybody. So far we have Elemental Cartomancy. Hello, Chris. Richard Gladstone. Hello, Richard. Deanne Blue Crescent. We have hello Deanne, and I think that's it. But the chat will be uploading and updating as we go. So
Yes.
Camelia and I have been talking for about 10 minutes already, so we're ready to go.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Yeah, and thank you to people who find the time to come to this room,
Yeah.
to this live talk. So thank you for your time, and I hope we'll have a good discussion. I don't know, read some cards. That's
Yes,
what I want to do.
absolutely. Yeah, I hit the mute again. I Well, first of all, thank you so much for coming here. It's really an honor to have you. I've been reading a lot of your books lately. I've been getting into sort of the mindset of sort of how different of a person, a tarot teacher you are, and like what value you bring for someone who has sort of been doing this a while.
Hmm.
And it's just really an honor to be able to get to pick your brain and talk about tarot. So thank you so much for doing this, and I hope you're doing well. So
Yes,
you're
absolutely. Thank you so much for having me again. Yeah. Yeah.
so
I'm
you are
very
so you came up. You're originally from Romania, right?
That's right. Yeah. I was born in Romania and I lived there until I was 21. And then I moved to Denmark. I came to Denmark actually as a refugee. I lived in communist Romania. So just before the communist regime fell, I had how should I say, the good fortune, of getting out of the country. And then I landed in Denmark quite by accident. I didn't plan it, so it was just like, okay, what country is available, and how can I, on what false visum can I get out of here?
Yeah.
So I just landed here, and then more than 30 years down the road, I found myself still, living here, um, making a life here, my career, so it has become my home, so I've been living here in Denmark now more than I have in Romania. But yeah, I did grow up in Romania, so I don't go back there so often these days. My parents are dead, so I don't have much family left in Romania. So my sister is also here in Denmark, so I have a
Yeah.
sister, and yeah. But we remember the good times, and when we do go back to Romania, what we like to do is go to the spa. We have all these excellent places up in the mountains, so but I
Excellent.
have good ties with Romania on all levels, so I have fond memories of it, and especially in terms of divination. I know that
Yeah.
you all want to know, so,
Yeah.
so I had what brought you here. So I don't know, like I find myself answering that question in various ways, although
Yeah, I'm sure.
the
I wanted to talk about that a little bit without being so redundant, but I'm sure. But so divination is a big part of the culture there in Romania, right? In some form or another.
yeah, I mean, yeah. Yes, you could argue that, or at least while I grew up, I'm not quite so sure how the status of the divination is there nowadays. So I don't. I'm I have become ignorant, But when I grew up, I could I could I could say that just about everybody I grew up with or everybody I knew, was doing some form of divination,
Yeah.
either from the serious to the more non-serious way. So for instance, there would never be a gathering I would ever be at without people reading coffee beans, just to give you an example, right? So everybody was invested in reading coffee beans, that we would have Turkish coffee, so that you have the nice patterns in the cup that would form. And I mean, I wouldn't say that most people actually knew what they were doing, but for the entertainment part, they all did it.
Yeah.
So I grew up encountering both very competent readers, yeah, but at the same time also encounter some that were just like downright full of shit, but still still very very fun to engage with, so we had everything, from reading or divining with coffee beans to playing cards. I mean, playing cards would be the when we talk about cartomancy, the playing cards would be our standard deck, so I didn't have a lot of exposure to the tarot cards so much in Romania.
Yeah.
So if I did any kind of divination, or at least in my circle of acquaintances, if we played with the cards for divination purpose, it would be the playing cards, like almost always.
Yeah.
Uh,
I
and
think it actually shows in your method. It's like, because a lot of us here, I feel like I can only speak for myself, but also in
Mhm,
my circle of friends, a lot of us sort of get fascinated with tarot first,
mhm,
and then we learn how to read the cards,
yeah.
and so like I have a relationship with the tarot. I do.
Mhm,
And it's more complicated than just divination for
yeah.
me. It's something that I have a passion for. I love it for some
Yeah.
reason. It's almost like some sort of relationship that I have with it. And you become really kind of familiar with the cards, you develop a relationship with them, and a passion. But it seems to me, and I don't want to I could be wrong about this, but it seems like you come at this more from a general divinatory practice, where
Mm,
it almost shows that you come from a playing card first kind of approach. Do you know what
mhm.
I mean about that? Like,
Yeah.
what do you think about that?
Well, I don't know. I suppose maybe in some circles one would distinguish between divination with the tarot cards and then fortune telling. Fortune telling with playing cards or oracle cards. So the Lenormand cards, for instance, have become quite popular these days. So so I, so my approach to the tarot, indeed is very much informed by what I did that could be falling under the category of fortune telling. So it's like, okay, so you like a fast and hard prediction. So but in a manner of speaking, everything we want to know will have that character, because even if you want to know, if you sit to the question about how you fare at your job, or you just, let's just take a common question, or people want to know how am I doing, although we can ask the type of questions that lend themselves to a description of the situation, often you will find an embedded desire, there to know where things are going, so the predictive element would always be there, even though the question would lend itself more to either a descriptive dimension or a reflective, dimension. In fact, this is also one of the major things that I try to bring to people's awareness in my own classes, as I get down on what kind of question you pose, so for instance, um and I'm a little bit a strange case, because when we talk about fortune telling with cards, and the type of fortune telling that I encountered in Romania, I mean, so let's just say you go to the gypsy, quite literally. And so sometimes we did that, yeah. So you go to the gypsy. So um, there wouldn't be this, you wouldn't find this tradition or this insistence that you otherwise find in my books, on the question, like, what is the goddamn question? I'm not going to read your cards unless I have a very clearly formulated, hopefully coherently articulated question, so in the fortune telling tradition, I mean, you go to the gypsy and then they put down the playing cards, and then they'll some would lean on some kind of methodical approach, while others would just go the commonsensical way, and then we would simply just distinguish between the functions, of each suit, so things like with the swords you cut, or you put somebody in the grave, with or the speaking of playing cards, spades, yeah, or with, with the diamonds you transact, you buy and you sell. With the batons or the clubs, you build something, build a relationship or a house or whatever. You work, yeah. And then what's the what's the other one? Am I missing? So we have the hearts,
Batons.
the
Oh,
hearts,
hearts.
the hearts you love somebody, or you are in a friendly relationship with. So so when you would go to the gypsy, let's just stick with that metaphor, they would lay down the cards and then they'll simply just read them according to these main functions. So in that sense, you wouldn't come. I mean, some would have some associations, like the symbolic associations. Five of swords, or five spades, they would relate to the body, or it's a four spades, like here is your coffin, or nine spades, it's like, oh, are you in for a major, mortal disappointment of sort. So you would just impose a kind of a symbolism onto what we already know, culturally speaking, about the first order signification of the card, that's related to the function of what you do with the swords, which is like to inflict pain on somebody. So but to make the point, it's like when you would go to the gypsy, you wouldn't necessarily need a question, because first of all, if you go back in time, also, like, let's face it, who would want to entrust the innermost secrets, to some person they just met,
Yeah.
And
No,
then
you're absolutely right. That's
that reputation that people would have. It's like, oh, I can't be pouring my soul out here, So no one would go to the fortune teller with this aim in mind to learn something about how they could grow spiritually. So that is not the thing I grew up with, like no one was interested in this dimension. How can I grow, and how can like, fuck that, nobody was interested, so what people, so because of that, then people would just want the more predictively oriented type of readings that would not necessarily be contingent on any kind of question, because, again, due to issues of trust, like I can't entrust my life to this person, but I wouldn't mind hearing what he or she might have to say. So now what I do in my own work, is like I follow that line of thinking, if you like. You just read the damn cards, according to their function. And we already have a symbolism there, because, even insofar as we said with the sword you inflict pain, that's also a thing that we agree upon at the level of convention, So it's not like we are free of symbolism, but we just get closer to that which hits the eye, So what's the most commonsensical thing to think about when you divide the suits into four main categories? Our whole existence can be said to be reduced to these four categories, right? So so you can read the cards just by looking at these things, but what I do in my own practice is insist, in fact, very much on bringing to the table a question, because what I have come to understand is that if you are to be efficient, or actually hit the mark, rather than just like say a bunch of things and then hope that the other would be picking on what you say, and then of course you can start the conversation. Is like in another circle, some would say this is just cold reading, it's like you just throw a lot of things at people, the fortune telling that is, and then the other would sort of, I'm also suffering from the me too, like I relate to that. And then you can have a conversation, off you go. However, in my practice, if I decided that if I want to be as precise as possible, I actually need to have a very clearly articulated question on my table, and that made a huge difference for me once I started thinking about it in those terms, that then I just realized that it made a difference. So sometimes, I'm a bit cautious to also say that I'm here to help people, sometimes I want to laugh, and some people get pissed off with me. So I said, I'm not here to help anybody, I'm here to answer questions, so that is how I see myself as a diviner or as a fortune teller. I'm here to answer question. Now, if my answering question actually helps somebody, well, more power to them, but I never presume to go in there and start to that premise and say, oh, I'm here to help, I mean, I don't know. I'm not a coach. I'm not, so, or are the other professions invested in helping? I mean, I don't give a fuck about helping. All I give a fuck about is like how precise I can be when I try to read this visual text. So how can I do that so that if I hit a mark, then my aim is to see that the other gets an idea in their head, and perhaps they go home and then they think about it. So like, yeah, why didn't I think about that? So in other words, what I see myself doing with the cards, what the from a purely fortune telling tradition, so called, or whether we talk more about the divinatory aspect, or we also can introduce some other kind of either magical thinking or whatever, oracular thinking into our readings. What I want is to give people something to think about. So that's what I'm doing. So yeah,
I tend to think of it the same way. I think of divination and fortune telling sort of the same way. I know that a lot of people don't, and I do know the different what you mean. A lot of these esoteric circles and stuff, they look at more spiritual growth and so forth. But I totally get what you're saying. But I see it all the same. Go ahead, continue. I didn't mean to.
But I mean, I don't want to belittle other people's work,
No,
and
of course
the
not.
way in which they approach this, it's not my table to judge, that's the last thing I want to do, but it's what I'm talking about. It's my own practice, and when I try to explain, the value of actually having a question on the table that we can then relate to all the time as we try to uncode the visual cues from the cards. It's like that it's like that. I suppose that the best way of doing it is simply just to exemplify, so I'm speaking of work, actually, and then I have my cards here, so why don't we just read some cards, because that's what I do, right? So let's
if anybody has a question for Camelia, want to read some cards, please just put your question in the chat. We have some really nice comments here. Let's see. Barely Balanced. Chris from Barely Balanced says he's a big fanboy. Camelia, your classes have been wonderfully refreshing and changed my whole approach to reading, mainly by cutting out the BS.
Thank you. Yeah. So, but while people get warmed up, I can just give an example of what I mean by focusing on having a question answered in as precise a mode as possible, as a manner, I guess I'm trying to talk about manners of interpretation rather than anything else that relies on systems of correspondences, from Kabbalah to astrology to what have you, esoteric tarot. So that's not really where I come from to this world, But let's just say, imagine that somebody, speaking of work, these days with people being laid off due to COVID or whatever, or shifting lanes. So one of the most common questions is the question related to work, So let's just, what should we ask? Let's just say that somebody is not feeling comfortable at the new working place. So I'm just going to cut the cards here and then put down the cards and then see what they say. So if somebody said, I don't know why I can't find my place at work, I feel uncomfortable, and I would like to know why that is so, right? So let me see, what did we get here? So I can just read it immediately. Okay, so suppose that is the question. Somebody wants to know why they don't feel comfortable at work, and so you can already, so when people put it that way, I immediately start to distinguish between, the type of questions that we have most commonly asked, like here, why don't I feel comfortable? So what people are asking for is actually a description of that state. So it's not so much about something else, how we can reflect, although that can be embedded there. Or it's not a predictive question either about how will it go, although that can also be embedded. But it's just like, I don't feel comfortable at work, and I wonder why that is so. So let's imagine that we put 3 cards down. I just shuffled here, so I got these cards.
Camelia, I'm going to make you bigger. I'm going to make you bigger if that's okay.
Okay, no problem.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay. So here it is. The first card that fell on the table is the card of the Chariot here, Justice, and the Lovers. So I'm reading here with the Marseille Tarot, as reconstructed by Jean-Claude Flournoy from France. So now he died a few years back, but I'm still using his cards. So now, so you see, if I now read the cards particularly with you to delivering a message that has to do with describing the situation rather than, giving advice or anything, then I would say, well, it seems that, sorry, this was the first card down. So it seems that you at your new work, you enter it with full confidence. But guess what? Perhaps the reason why you're not feeling comfortable is because you run into some procedures. Where is it? Justice, right? The justice is we find justice in courthouses. Let me see, how am I sitting? I don't have a mirror.
Yeah, no, you're good. You can see perfectly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So justice, we find justice in a courthouse. Justice is the one that formalizes everything, the bureaucrat, right? So if this person is not feeling comfortable at work, the charioteer type, right, the one who is eager, the young man who had just started, they're not feeling comfortable because they run into procedural issues, right? And maybe the colleagues here, the people that we find on the lovers card, try to give this person some sort of advice, and then who wants to if you are the charioteer riding, the shining armor, you'd want to receive more credit or recognition already, but when my answer would actually address exactly, I say, well, you don't feel comfortable because you can't figure out, you can't read the room, you can't figure out the procedure at work, and that gives me I get that from this card, from justice. So now, of course, the embedded advice, if I were to dispense any advice, I would say, well, maybe you should actually be doing exactly this. Get down from your big horse. The charioteer is riding in that wagon that's drawn by two horses. So I say, well, how about you get down from that thing? So we see, even in terms of the size, so we have the charioteer becoming much smaller here. It's the same person. It becomes a much smaller person here, who is now quite dependent on what these other people are saying. So, so in my practice, I mean, this is a very simple way of exemplifying, how I actually distinguish between trying to hear what kind of question I'm grappling with, like, is it a descriptive question? Am I answering? Is this a question that requires me and the other to reflect on their condition? Is this a question that has an evaluative dimension in it, so we can just evaluate how the situation, so that we can take it further, investigate what the next step is? Or is this a question, that has to do with action, like yeah, exactly. So then what do you recommend? So if the person that I have a conversation with about this, that starts out with, I'm uncomfortable at work. Why? And so my answer is then, so people can sit with all sorts of vague notions, so, well, it's because you didn't get down to reading the small writing, it's like there is some procedural stuff at work that you are not clear about, and your team there or your colleagues are trying to introduce you to that thing, and then you feel small suddenly, So I would say, okay, so that's a description of the situation. I could just stop there, because the person didn't exactly say, okay, then what can I do? But if we do have a conversation face to face, then I may elect, to go also down and into the other more nitty gritty, if you like, that spills into the proactive, type of advice that I can dispense, and say, well, maybe you should actually, lay down your shining armor, or put it off, put your shining armor off, learn the rules, each working place has its own rules. Maybe some of them are even pinned on the door or something, yeah. And if you're not sure about something, why don't you just ask, so don't hesitate to ask. So have that conversation with your colleagues, try to listen to the left and to the right. In fact, we have that very notion somewhere embedded in the visuals here. We have this young man listening to those hags, whatever, women, one on the left and one on the each, try to have the say. So, so that would be my advice. But you see, I never make this move into into dispensing advice unless I have a just cause for it, or I have good reason for it. So my whole practice actually hinges on making this type of distinction. So in that sense, I'm not your either esoteric fortune teller who starts things like, oh, the charioteer means victory, justice means truth, and the lovers means, well, doing what you like, So because and I granted that a lot of other readers have made huge careers out of delivering this kind of message, because it's empowering to the subject. And if I tell you that you enter that working place full of force and eagerness, and you have your shining armor, you are victorious, and just that's your truth, So I could, if I were to focus on the more symbolic association meanings, of the cards with these conventions, then say, and just do what you love, So now that would also be a kind of a divination session, no problem, right? But that's not my approach, because when I try to think about what we're actually saying when we associate cards with their symbolical conventions, in this case here, the charioteer means victory, justice means truth, the lovers means you love, love. So I'm always trying to hear myself. So, okay, fine. So does this narrative though go anywhere? Is this thing going anywhere? Where is it going? So when I put it that way, then I shudder, because I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to be that fortune teller, who just regurgitates some kind of standard associations, that one finds in all sorts of random books, some more clever than others, some not all that interesting, but the world is full of pretense, right? So no problem. So I mean, yeah, everything is fascinating, but what interests me at the end of the day is whether what we deliver to the other actually goes somewhere. And then even if it happens that they get moved, I like it when, if I have something to say, moves people, say, I'm moved by that, or I can actually see that now I'm moving in the right direction. I'm making the right move, I understand now, like what you're saying. So it's because there is a level of concreteness here. When you say like, okay, you are in this work very confident, but like of course I could impose a positive, as it were, like some people say this is positive, this is negative, like I'm not. I could do that, but how boring, So, but in the context of the question, when somebody already presents you with their predicament and say, I'm not feeling comfortable. So in all good conscience, I cannot read this kind of says, well, there is truth. No, you have to read justice as it relates to this person's predicament, And if they're not feeling comfortable, then I instantly let my brain put two and two together and say, well, maybe it's because it has to do with the method, that applies at that working place. Maybe there is some procedure that this person is not clear about, and then before it's like very quickly you go from the attitude of full display, of your whatever it is that you think you bring to this new working place, to where you feel very small suddenly, right? So I would also feel uncomfortable. So therefore, my embedded advice would be like, why don't you just read the rules, or actually have that talk with your colleagues, let them inform you on what's what, on what applies when. And so on. And so know your place, know your place. So the person can then say, yeah, I get it now. Yeah, it didn't occur to me to maybe I should be reading the curriculum, or maybe I should be reading the regulations. The often working places have that's how bureaucracy works. They have a whole folder, filled of regulations, and it doesn't occur to some people that might be of help. So in my so-called divination, what I do is I actually try to deliver what I see in the cards, and then what I see as it relates to the question is, then I hope that the other can also see, and then they're going to say, yeah, okay, now I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because I hear that often from people. Like I had Rachel Pollack on, some would say a lot different reader. I see a lot of similarities between
Mhm.
what you do. I feel like what Rachel does is more with ideas and stories, but she's still riffing and doing, like, instead of riffing off of images, she's riffing off of ideas. But the one thing she said to me, which is the same thing that you just said, which
Mhm.
is when I asked her what the most important advice she would have, was she
Yeah.
said, "See what there is to see in the cards."
Yeah.
See what there is to see in the cards. And I find
Mhm.
that that's very kind of common between really gifted readers. Um, it's
Yeah.
just something that I noticed. It's a commonality, you know?
Yeah. But I mean, there is in the tarot world, this notion of seeing what you see in the card. Sometimes, if you are prone to internalizing systems of correspondences, like boxes after boxes, like this corresponds with that, and that, then because we are so conditioned, then we think that that is what we see, we see the symbol, and that's why we have all this riffing of symbols rather than riffing of functions, so if I depart from some other types of fortune tellers, is actually in this very um, uh, difference, that I hardly ever focus on the symbolic so-called meanings, because I'm just not interested, because as a literature person, I used to be a university professor for
Yeah.
25 years, so, and then when I retired, I thought, why don't I just write about these cards, so so I come to the cards also having this, yeah, let's call it baggage, where I'm actually accustomed to uncoding messages from the text, whether they are literal or visual, so, but there are other types of principles that I'm more interested in pursuing, so because I am dealing with a visual material, so there are things that you can follow, graphic design, so before I go and I say the emperor means power, I'm trying to actually see, well, what does this person do when I look at the card, so I say, well, that person is just sitting in the sovereignty with a scepter in their hand. So of course it's easy to impose the notion of power on a figure like that, because they display power through their appearance, but then there are other things that can give I mean, that can enter into relation with the card next to it, and then we can also have an indication as to what kind of leader this emperor is. Is it a good one or a bad one? So if I happen to have a nasty so-called card next to the emperor, like the devil or something, then I will say this is some sort of a manipulative tyrant, the mobs, cutting deals under the table, because that, guess what, the domain of the devil is the underground, right? So I would instantly modify this convention of the emperor means power, by looking at what the next card tells me about the nature of the ways in which this figure, applies power to their function, so
Yeah.
so I never see cards in this individually in the static, as it were, appearance, because there are these other rules, so I look at color, I look at lines, I look at design, I look at how one thing spills into the next, or what I find
Yeah.
rhymes, so there is some who say this is the Marseille school, these people like to talk in terms of schools, we have
Yeah.
esoteric schools, and then we have fortune telling schools, whatever, and then the so-called fortune telling schools, they prioritize, the graphic design in the cards, and then we look at some other thing, tension, like, but in terms of how we also bring this to our awareness, I mean, I think I used to teach poetry classes, right? And people would tell me, oh, poetry, why, yeah, it sounds good, but it's difficult to interpret. I don't get it. How do you do it? What's the first thing? So I say, well, why don't you start with what resists you? What is the tension? If you see that there is a metaphor there that's kind of like, oh, that sounds weird. So start with that, so I see that there is zero difference between the ways in which you approach a poetic text, that presents you with a level of ambiguity, where you start with what astonishes you, like what moves you. If so, you don't even know, like, oh, you just have this feeling, wow, I have no idea what I've just read, but I love it. So it's like that emotional response, right? So start with that, so why is it that you love it? Which part of this poem, or what line, or what phrase, or what word, elicits that emotion? So when I read the tarot cards, I read them in the exact same way. I'm looking at, okay, I have 3 rhymes here, 3 people on the lover's card, 3 people or 3 figures on the devil's card, 3 figures on the judgment card. Yay! Everything rhymes. And then I have a card like the force, the woman with the lion. And then if I were to see this in a string, I would instantly put the 3 that rhyme beautifully, symmetrically. I would put them aside and I'll say, okay, there is the odd one out. Let's start with that. We are going to look at that one, as the first starting point. So this is just another way of reading text, so that is not, that doesn't hinge on any kind of esoteric vocabulary. So that's what I'm trying to say. So we're not reading correspondences. We are not reading according to meanings, nor are we reading according to set positional spreads. You lock cards in predetermined positions, like you have the Celtic cross, you have what have you, trillions of spreads that everybody invents for whatever reason. But the most classic is always the one that places the subject in relation to something like this is me, this is you, this is my enemy, this is my future, this is my past, this is my ambition and aspiration, this is my whatever, this is my fear, this is my joy, this is my death, the outcome, and then the whole thing comes down, right? So it's easy to perform a divination session by looking at spreads like that, but I would say that's the lazy approach. It just doesn't appeal to my mind. So I prefer the thing where that appeals to the combinatory force, so I find that there is a lot more genius and power, in the ways in which we get to combine, what we see. So that's just what
stringing together the meanings of or what you see on the images. That's We have I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but we have a question here by Chris. This is a question I have. I always ask, what I'm doing wrong in romance, but what am I doing right? Okay. I always ask what I'm doing wrong in romance, but what am I doing right? This is what.
Okay, so let's see. So should we have the cards down for that one? Why not? That's it, but because that's 2 questions actually, so that's cheating. What am I doing wrong in romance? So my practice would be to lay down 3 cards for that one first.
I think it's a statement. He's got. Because I read it wrong. I apologize. I always ask what I'm doing wrong in romance, comma, but what am I doing right? So he's asking one question.
Yeah,
is a statement and a question. So
yeah, that's true. Although he does say, I always ask what I'm doing wrong in romance. So, so in a way, okay. So, but see, if I have to insist on my practice, I would have to say, so which one comes first? What do you really want to know? What you're doing wrong or what you're doing right? So can we have that? Because we need to be specific. I mean, I don't like to muddle any waters. So if I have to shoot the mark, then I would have to have a focus in one place, not 2 places.
What am I doing right in romance, if anything?
Anything. Okay, what am I doing right? Actually, listen, you should know what you're doing right in romance. Damn, we should have started this. Okay, what you're doing right. So let's see. I'm just going to put the cards down. What you're doing right. Oh my, look at this. Somebody's doing just the right thing. So here I got the cards. So the first card down is the Star. Then we have the World. And then we have the Charioteer. So, so it looks like what you're doing right. So what am I doing right at all? It's like, well, you are definitely looking for this beautiful woman, naked. Preferably you want her naked. When not, the woman who has the capacity, to stand there in her own nakedness, handling her chalices, and of course, we don't know what purpose she has, pouring her waters into the ground, so either this is one who is discarding some shit that she doesn't like, or else she just, as the standard vocabulary also have it, this is the person who's nourishing the ground. So we don't know. So, but what am I doing right? Well, what you're doing right is that you're hoping, wishing upon a star. Let's go that convention. You are wishing upon a star for the perfect woman. Yay! We have here the world, so the world being the last trump. I'm reading here, by the way, just to the trump cards. So what you're doing right is you're wishing upon your star for the perfect woman, and then you don't hesitate to go after her. Yeah. So we have the charioteer in the final position in movement. So that's what you're doing right. So am I doing right? And if anything at all, I'm saying you are perfect in what you're doing, because that's how you start. First, you have an idea, of a partner. Yeah, in romance, you have an idea. Perhaps you even know exactly what to look for. You want to look for this woman. My cards. You want to look for this woman who exhibits star power, yeah, star qualities, because she is your perfect. This idealization, spills into your notion of perhaps what a partnership should look like. That oneness, you are one with the desire. You are one with the one you make a wish for upon a star. Your idealized woman, is also the one you can be one with. And then, as we also have it here emphasized on this card, there is this the whole world. You want this woman so that you can share a whole world with, right? So you want to share your world with her. But here we don't have two people; we have just one person. So, which gives me some of the notion that the one you are seeking possesses that singularity. Someone who perhaps mirrors your own desire. So the star here can be seen as a representation of your desire, of your stellar desire. and then you go for her. So what you're doing, that's right. That was your question. What am I doing that is right? Is that you just go for her, And then I'll say, what can I say? Like, a la charioteer, keep going, keep riding, keep wishing upon the star. See now the advice. So even though you didn't ask for it, you didn't ask for any advice. God damn it, I can't help myself. I'm full of shit. I said I never do that. Dispense advice when it's not asked for. So, but today I will do it. So so what you're doing right is that that you go for this idealized woman, that whom you see as your whole world. Yeah. So what's wrong with that? Nothing. I mean, don't we all want that? I mean, I should hope for our own good sake that in our desires for romance, we aim for the infinite love. Let's put it that way. No, it's the most beautiful thing. And then we go for it full force. So there you have it. So, in a way, I don't even need to dispense any advice. Probably you know this already. And probably you are also asking, what am I doing wrong? Because you are already galloping towards her. So now we could have the second question: is that what am I doing wrong if I gallop towards this idealized woman, that I want to share my life with, to the point where there is no separation between us. But we can take that question another time.
Yeah.
No, I guess that would be my answer anyway. So what am I doing? Yeah.
So we have Mendy here who asks, where will my foray into traditional art take me?
Okay. Traditional art. Can you be more specific about traditional art? Because the cards can be very specific. So, if we have to be specific, or what kind of art? Is it like plastic arts or, yeah.
I don't want to answer for her. I know, but I don't want to answer. I'll wait for Mendy to, I don't want to influence.
Yeah.
Wait to see what she
Because
says.
I mean, you see, if you ask me, I mean, I'm interested in art history and all that. So as soon as people say traditional art, I can think of 100 things. So so if we have to have a clear question, a clear answer on the table, I would need to have some more context.
It'll just take a minute to upload, probably.
Hmm.
Okay, here we go. Studying the techniques of the old masters, starting in charcoals and oils.
Okay, thank you. See, now we are getting somewhere. So, what will your foray? So, see now, when you put it like that, what my foray into tradition take me? Wasn't that the question? The initial
Yep.
question. Yeah.
Where
Mhm.
will my foray into traditional art take me?
Take me. Yeah. So that's also a descriptive answer that we are looking for. All right. So here is what you got. So you got the first card down was the Wheel of Fortune. The second card down is the World. And the third card down was the Emperor. So I would say in the context of your question, given that you mentioned the old masters, what is it? I see the Wheel of Fortune as exactly the card that suggests that repetitive meaning you are copying the masters, so you just want to go with what has been before, so excellent. This one validates what you are already doing. The Wheel of Fortune, it just goes round and round. Yeah. So you are repeating what the old masters are doing with view to having your work displayed. So if you keep cultivating the old masters in a cyclical way, you just turn that wheel, in their image, if you like, or in whatever, according to their method. And then where will it take me? Well, it will take you to a gallery, where you can have your work displayed, So here it's almost like you can see this. It's almost like very much suggestive now of a painting on a wall, right? There's always like with all this decorative stuff, And insofar as we have four witnesses here, this is suggestive to me of a public that's viewing from the outside. So where will it take me? It will take you to displaying your work. Let me see with the focus here. My camera is kind of making a fuss. So you will display your work if you keep imitating the old masters, and then you rule. Yeah. How nice. You'll sit sovereignly with sovereignty, yeah, on a throne, and you will have that satisfaction, of having conquered a territory. So I would say that if you go, for cultivating these old masters, and if you get your gallery display or whatever, museum display, whatever it is, you can display your work, then chances are that you will also benefit royally, yeah, from displaying mastery of your own. Because when we see the emperor here, we see somebody who has already conquered. We always think of an emperor having the ability to conquer a territory or sitting comfortably on a territory. So this is suggestive very much of you having found your own thread or your own voice, let's put it that way, yeah, which is a nice thing. So good luck to you. I think that's good news. So we didn't get any nasty cards, so we got the good ones. So
And
whatever you
Chris gave a little feedback. He just said everything resonated. It was great.
win. Cool.
So if anybody else has any questions, put them in all caps. I don't want Camelia reading here all day
No, we
for
only have
us, but
an hour, so
yeah,
wasn't
no,
it?
that's totally fine. I actually did a practice reading the other day. It was really interesting.
Uh-huh.
So Phillies baseball is very popular here in Philadelphia. We have the Philadelphia Phillies, and I don't often do predictive readings, often because I like it's a little scary. But I've been reading your book, and you're kind of like giving me a little bit of confidence, and so I went out on a limb and I did a predictive reading, and
Mhm.
I believe I asked something like, who will win the game tomorrow between or will the Phillies win the game tomorrow with the Mets?
Mhm.
And I just want to show you the cards I pulled.
Yeah.
So I pulled the valet
Yeah.
of swords,
Yeah.
the king of coins, the Roy,
Mhm.
and I pulled the seven of wands.
Mhm.
And so I automatically, this is what I said. I said that something like the pitchers will not be getting off of their asses,
Mhm.
and the hitters will be discouraged or something like that. That they'll be oh no, the batters will be moping around,
Mhm.
was what I said. But then in the comment section, I said I feel like this was saying that the pitcher would be taking a seat. He would be
Mhm.
benched.
Mhm. Mhm.
And this, it's funny because strikes in baseball are symbolized as X's. Like strikeouts in baseball, they're written as
Mhm.
X's, like on
Mhm.
the books. So I made a prediction. I said that by the fifth inning, or I'm sorry, it was the five of wands, not the seven. I grabbed the wrong card. By the
Okay.
fifth inning, I
Mhm.
wrote, uh, you know, the pitcher,
Yeah.
Aaron Noel, will be benched, and the Phillies will not do great.
Uh-huh.
Crazy, like he was pulled out in the fourth inning. He threw an epically horrible game. He even hit one of the batters. It was insane. It blew my mind. I was like, "Wow, what a synchronicity!" Like
Mhm.
everything I said came perfectly true. It was like
Mhm.
actually he was taken out not in the fifth, but the fourth. It was in the middle of the fourth inning, going into the fifth inning. He was yanked.
Mhm.
The pitching coach went in and they changed pitchers, and they lost the game 9-6. So I said
Wow.
something like not good, but it totally blew my mind. So I did it again, but I have
Yeah.
to see because the Phillies play tonight. I believe it's 7. So,
Yeah.
and I put another question up on the Tarot de Marseille
Yeah.
group, but it was it was just reading it very visually.
Oh, yeah, congratulations. That exactly, that's a beautiful reading, because here the way in which you read the King of Diamonds. Yeah, sorry, I always, even after so many years, I always confuse King of Coins. Yeah, so the fact that in see what you did there is exactly what I'm trying to teach constantly. As they relate what you see, the imagery in the cards relate everything to the context of the question, so here it's like players and pitchers. I mean, sorry, I know nothing about baseball. So I probably would have failed miserably at predicting about but I mean, so exactly, I mean, this is how you go. So you won't, don't let yourself be deterred by associating the king of coins with a powerful tycoon, the man of money. I mean, because that would be irrelevant, So to
Yeah.
start saying the king of coins means financial power, and it's like, yeah, but I'm talking about the baseball game, right?
Well, very visually, if you look at it, he looks like a pitcher,
Right.
but he's got even almost like a ball in his hand.
Uh-huh.
But he's sitting down, and you obviously can't play baseball sitting down. And then I said it wasn't the seven of wands; it was the five, but it kind of looks similar in that it has the
Yeah.
X, and then it
Yeah.
has the baton through it, and so it was almost like he's not able to throw strikes, because the X is kind of symbolizes the strike, but it's like being blocked.
Yeah.
So he's just had an off game, and then you have this guy here,
Yeah.
the valet looks very discouraged, and he's got like the bat on his shoulder. It looks like a
Yeah.
bat to me,
Yeah.
and he's
Yeah.
just looking off like, man, like no matter how good I play,
Yeah.
I can't get ahead because the pitching is just horrible tonight.
Yeah, that's a
And
beautiful that's a beautiful reading. Of course, sometimes when you are in doubt about it, the other thing that you can do is actually look at the what value the cards have. So here the page of the valet de paix, the valet of swords, the valet of swords, shows somebody who is in the hesitant position. I mean, we have the warrior with the sword, but it's like if you look at even at his face, that it's like, is he striking or not? Nah, it's not very likely. He is thinking about it, but not very likely. And then, of course, if we also look at the seven, or like now you said five batons, what you do, the batons, it takes some effort, right? So we're not there with the cards that testify unambiguously towards, an affirmative and say yes, they win, because here where the batons, in that context, it's a given, so often, I mean, now you say, like, you focus mainly on the king of coins resembling the picture, and then you just saw that, and he sits, right? He's not doing anything. That's an excellent observation. That's how one does it, or that's how I do it, and then I'm always happy to see others are doing the same thing. So but the other two cards there, you can also see how they weaken in case one is in doubt, so you have to see, okay, what's plausible, these cards here, they're not the strongest cards in the three cards string. So so am I going to rule that the team will win? No, probably not, so we are there with the batons, who don't give us a resounding yes in any way. The batons, while we'll have to see to what extent this work can also find a manifestation in a realized manifestation, so beautiful reading, excellent. Just keep it like that. I would say, if I have to say
it was really fun and very simple. And I
Yeah.
tend to, like, because I started off with the Rider-Waite-Smith, obviously, and like a lot of other people, and I still enjoy reading with those, and I do my daily reads a lot
Yeah.
with them. But when I pull Tarot de Marseille, there's something about it that my readings completely change, and I am pulled more to like a visual type open reading style reading, like which is what you're saying, and it's just, it makes a lot more sense. And I've finding myself doing that using the other decks as well. Like I feel like that's like where I'm headed. So I don't know, but I'm still obviously experimenting and playing. I just playing with the cards, really.
Well, that's the idea.
Yeah, I mean, that's
There's
basically.
nothing more off-putting than all those who think that they need to take themselves ever so seriously. I mean, like,
Yeah. I
I
know.
just want to laugh, So yeah, that's so the whole. I mean, it is called a game, or it used to be a game. I mean, what we do with the cards, we play with them, So if we
Yeah.
lose sight of that, then I would feel sorry for all of us.
Very true.
I have to presume anything, which I prefer not to, but on occasion I do, and I like to pontificate and say, please don't take yourselves ever so seriously, just read the damn thing, and then don't forget the playfulness aspect, that goes into trying to put two and two together, and then simply just relate what you see in the cards to what is on your mind, or what is the true question. Often, if you are in doubt, say, I'm not sure how to formulate, and it's like, that's because you don't dare to ask what you really want to know. So that is also one of the other things that I insist on, that if you dare to be honest with what you really want to know, then the question will fall on the table in a most perfectly articulate way, and that's your starting point. So the starting point is never really in the cards, and it's never like, some people say, oh, I don't like questions. They are distracting to me. I hear some, and I'm like, okay, more power to you, diviners, who want to read without the question. Although, that's a whole other thing. That's not divination. That's just, just looking at those cards and then lecturing others, on meanings, on correspondences. And with all due respect, that can also be entertaining and fascinating in its own right, but does it go anywhere?
Right.
So it doesn't go anywhere. It's like, and if it doesn't go anywhere, then it's not really, neither is it divination, nor is it fortune telling, So I think that
Yeah.
we have to hammer on what we're doing here in our function, fulfilling this function of divining or offering a good fortune telling prediction, then we need to show a very clear sense of direction. This is going here, not somewhere else. Because and then, of course, often if people say, yeah, but it can also mean this other thing, I also hear that other defensive so-called argument. It can also mean I say, no, it can't, because if you have a very clear question, then you will see it exactly. You will see exactly how you can put it in such a way so that it relates to the question. Then you realize that, man, no in hell can this mean something else? It would mean something else if your question would be muddled or fuzzy or not clear, or it embedded or involved. Sometimes people have lots of involved questions. So one of my tasks also that I set ahead of me as a fortune teller is to actually help people to get down to the essentials. What is essentially on your mind? What do we want to essentially know? So once we get that clear, then I cast the cards. I never cast the cards for involved questions or implicit whatever, or people sometimes ask for a description and then they go like, well, she didn't predict anything. Or people didn't throw that to me, but on occasion, I'm sure perhaps that could be an objection if somebody wants to have it in for me, right? Let's just put it out. And then actually, on occasion, I did have people like that. And I say, yeah, did you ask for a proactive? No, you didn't. You asked for a description. So I gave you that. So fuck off. So and then people, yeah, okay, yeah. So I said, so try next time, so maybe next time you will get a better sense of, why what I'm saying is of value. So to have that confidence, it relates always, or my point is you cannot have that confidence unless you know exactly what types of questions or people in that sense you are dealing with. So it's never in the card. You put down the cards and then you look at the cards and then you shoot blanks and then you just, oh yeah, and then, oh, but I'm a psychic or I'm a medium and it's because I read intuitively and I don't need a question. And I mean, I yeah, whatever. Whatever works for you.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, that's really the truth, though. I mean, it's like everybody has different personalities. Everybody has different likes and interests, and I think ultimately you have to find what works for you. But it just seems to me that your method is very good, particularly at answering questions, which I'm finding very helpful. And I'm really enjoying your books. So I'm reading Read Like the Devil currently, and I also just cracked open your book on pips. But I do have to get the Trump's version. I should probably read the Trump's one first, but
Yeah.
I was just interested in what you had to say about the pips. And I've had this one for a while, so I have to get it. But how many books do you have?
Oh,
A lot, right?
yeah, I
Like,
think so.
but people
Yeah.
can look
Well,
and
I
see
think,
what.
yeah, I wrote over 30 books, but not all of
Wow.
them are on divination because some are just some are my academic books. I'm not sure people are interested in that. But within the divination category, I have about 15 books that I wrote there. So and mostly are on using the Marseille Tarot, but then they Read Like the Devil trilogy. That's like that's my strongest my strongest offering in the teaching department, if you like, because they're based on these 3 volumes are based on my very popular courses. So they are dedicated to the Marseille Tarot, playing cards, and the Lenormand Oracle.
Great.
Actually, I have them right here, so I can even show
I
you.
have all the digital copies, so normally this is the only hard copy I have. The rest of them I have PDF
Yeah.
for PDF form. Very
So
good.
over 1,000 pages of stuff, So
And that's Lenormand, playing cards, and
playing
Tarot de
cards
Marseille.
and Tarot de Marseille. Yeah.
Beautiful.
So I would recommend if people are interested in this sort of thing. And what I like about this, or what people like about what I like, of course, I always like all my books. But what people say about these books is that, what they appreciate about them is that I give lots of examples. They're all student driven. The examples are all student driven, and the books are based on my interactions with students in my classrooms, So, and I sit there with people doing what we do now, and then actually the one that answered the question, he sat there in my classroom so he can testify. That's exactly what we do. So, if students fuck up, and sometimes they do because they lose sight of what is essential, either in the question or they mix the levels, and that's always ends up wrong, or the argument doesn't hold because of this mixing of levels often. The question levels and what we see in the cards. Sometimes we have the nature cards, and then we have the people cards, and we have we deal with different natures. So people often don't think about that distinction. It's like, what is a demonic world or angelic world is not the same as the world of the animals, the dogs howling at the moon, or the world of the suits, the emperor and the pope and all of that. So so often when people go on a wrong tangent is when they mix the levels, and all of a sudden they say, hey, but can't you see that these two natures, they are clashing? They are not on the same page. The woman on the fourth card doesn't share the same nature as the lion that she's trying to tame, or whatever it is. So can you think of that first? So so these books are all very much about how we can get down to being precise. So there are all these examples of what people do that they do wrong. So these books have that corrective whip embedded in the teaching. So if one is interested in knowing, okay, how did Camelia's students fare, how did they manage, then these are the books for you. Then there is the Towards the Art of Reading Marseille Tarot that has sold in thousands. So people, thank you very much. That's people still appreciate that one. That's more like an introduction to the card. So if people don't want to read the 400 pages on the Marseille Tarot, which is my essential course, then they can just pick the other one that's only 200 pages. And then I don't know. So I have 15 books, but they're all on Amazon. Most of them, if not all of them, are in both paperback and ebook. The only one that's not available is the one, the latest, or
That's such a beautiful book. My God,
yes,
that's so
I love
pretty.
It. I mean, this was
Romeo and Juliet, right? Tarot,
yes,
Romeo and Juliet.
Celebration volume. So it's bound in silk with gold. Where is it? Gold stuff, and
Yeah,
I love it.
That's a beautifully bound book. I could tell just by looking at it. I have an interest in bookbinding, and
yeah,
I sometimes buy books just for how pretty they are, which I gotta stop
still have
doing.
a few copies of the silk edition. So, but otherwise, it's also available in paperback and as an ebook. But the distribution for the fine edition is done through EyeCorner Press. So you can find that on Amazon. So if anybody.
And also on your website too, which is readlikethedevil.com. I believe I have that down below, but you also have some blogs too. You have various Aradia everything will be put down below.
Yeah, I actually have several websites. So my main website, CameliaElias.com.
Right.
That will direct you to everywhere else. The readlikethedevil.com is my professional bookings. So if somebody is interested in reading, they can go there and book it. There is the Aradia Academy, where I have all my courses, and then there is EyeCorner Press that I promote, that I am the editor-in-chief for. So that's a publishing house that started more than 15 years ago with 5 universities. So now it has, we have lots of divination books, books that focus on the human imagination, and how precisely we tell stories and all that. So yeah, what's it? The necromancy class was a boost. Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah, these are just positive comments people are saying. And then Kira wrote, Camille, you're fabulous, just a fountain of pure energy and truthfulness. Yeah, absolutely.
But positive, yes.
Agree.
Negative, also, I'm also all for people sending me to hell.
That's okay. It's a small price to pay. And Chris also mentioned that you were on a fantastic podcast show called What Magic Is This? Folks should check it out. So
yes, thank you. Thank you for all this plugging.
Do you have? Oh, absolutely. Do you have anything else coming up, or anything you want to talk about, or before we go?
No, I mean, other than just entice people to, get a deck and then, play with the cards, and maybe.
I skip.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say I skipped right to Read Like the Devil. I got to go back and read your other, but I did read that it was more of an introductory kind of thing, and
Mm.
I thought,
Yeah.
but I really am enjoying it. I'm looking forward to reading the playing cards one as
Yeah.
well, which is cool.
Yeah, that has also, people have also had many good things to say. Well, all of them, I guess, and
Yeah.
the Lenormand though is the thickest, that's almost 400 pages. But then also because I wrote a lot on the Lenormand cards, So, but the approach is always the same, insofar as I prioritize looking at the cards functionality, and I prefer to draw on the graphic design and what I see here and now, but always as it is contingent on a very clearly articulated question. That's what the people ask. So what is read like the devil? And it's like, well, the read like the devil is the devil is in the detail, but it has to start somewhere. So your premise is always the question. What is the premise is not to help others. So allow me to pontificate. It's not to help others, but to listen to what the question is and then answer the damn thing and not something else. And then if of course a discussion can always unfold and we can sit here until midnight or whatever, and then discuss or go around all sorts of other things, including uh, tarot for esoteric purposes, or the fortune telling cards, or playing cards for pure uh, prediction, so we can go into all sorts of stories or design, so that's a different matter. But what is most important is like what stares you in the face and what the question is, so like that, let's just never forget that. Or at least, if that is to say, if people are interested in getting precise, if people are interested in other things, because this is like, oh, I'm just reading like growth or spiritual, or I'm not saying I don't answer those kind of questions when people pose them. I mean, there are lots, so we can answer them, but I never have that as a starting premise in my practice, so I never put it that way, that somehow my whole operation as a professional fortune teller has to do with any kind of artist statement, and I'm a, I help others. So I mean, I don't presume to be so arrogant, I mean, with all due respect to all the others who are ever so heavily invested in this, more power to them. But that's not what drives my engine. I have other fish to fry than to get entangled in how I can presume to help others. If I can answer a goddamn question, then I'm happy.
Yeah.
And I hope others can see how perhaps putting it that way and keeping it simple in that way, or like, what is the function of a fortune? Just think about the Oracle at Delphi, or the um, all the classics. We have so many representations in classical literature of fortune tellers. What are they known for? They are known for answering questions. They're not known for participating in, I don't know, self help or empowerments. And no, they answer questions. Yeah, that's their
Yeah.
function. And if I have to say that I follow a tradition, that is the one. Other traditions that have no interest to me.
Yeah. It's a very focused approach. It's very focused on the specific question. You know.
Mm,
I've stopped pulling, like, so what I used to do, I was just pull three cards and not have a question, but now I always make sure I have a question.
that's
Even
it.
if it's just a general three card, because what I would do, and I learned a little bit about doing this, pulling three cards and kind of looking at the cards and getting to know the characters on the cards and so forth. But
Mm,
I always have a question now, even if it's just a simple card pull for the
right.
day. I'll just like, how will today go, or what
Yeah.
do I need to know for today, something like that. Just
Mhm.
always have a focus, because
Yeah.
there's too many meanings that the card, it's just these cards can mean literally anything, but when you put it in context,
Mhm.
it makes
Yeah.
it so much easier.
Yeah, but
So
that's the problem with the symbolic approach, or the meanings. There are way too many meanings than we can mobilize. And if we want to be ever so concrete and really hit that mark, and not just leave it up to, oh, I'm a seventh generation psychic. And that's my fame, my claim to fame. that I hit it because, you know, so that, I mean, I don't know. I trained in logic, so my rational brain doesn't accept that as a good argument, or it's like, no, it's like I want to know exactly how we go from A to B, right?
Yeah.
I need to know how we cover that territory, and if you don't produce a convincing argument as to how you travel from A to B, then, you know, don't waste my time. So, you know, so that's the thing, you know. It's like we need to be able to essentialize to the bones, you know, like, and to narrow down, you know, the scope of what we need to want to know. Or like I just did here, like with the person who asked about the traditional art, and I'm like, yeah, thank you, you know. What is that? Can you be more specific? You know, so as soon as people get more specific, and I instantly, because I operate with memory, obviously. I mean, there is no other world than the world of memory, the world of cultural competence, you know. So as soon as you mention old masters, I'm using charcoal, I'm using the oil paint, you know. So I instantly conjure to my head exactly the word. So I look at the cards, and then I see what's happening. You know, I see that there is that recycling of old ideas. You know, what has been done before. You know, that can be displayed, but from an impetus, you know, that still um, spells out, or, you know, individual power, you know, like in that emperor card. So you know, so you can see how you can get very concrete about it. So if I were just to have answered that question on a general, I'm like, traditional art, you know, it's like, yeah. I don't know, it's not sure that I could have been nearly as precise. I'm not saying that I was terribly precise in answering that question, but that my aim is to get as close to a level of precision that I can possibly master. You know, then I just lose myself in the woods and then, well, pretend something else. I'm not interested in that.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. It's been an absolute education and a pleasure, and I hope that you'll come on again sometime. And thank you. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
Well,
off.
I just want to say thank you for having me. Yeah.
Wonderful.
It's always fun to throw some cards, meet new people, old people, all the
Yeah,
questions.
some of
Yeah.
the folks here know you well. They've taken some of your classes and so forth. I just want to thank everybody for stopping by today. Sorry, if I couldn't say hello to you as you were coming in. Is I get into the conversation. I did see everybody coming in though. Thanks everybody for stopping by, and thank you again, Camelia. And until next time, everybody, love and peace.
Thank you.
Bye.